Penna Dexter.
Thank you very much for joining us, ladies and gentlemen, for Point of View. We're so glad you're with us today, and there's a lot in the news. We want to go a little bit later in the program to the whole transgender agenda. We've got a representative coming onto the program for an interview. They are with the National Center for Public Policy Research. They sent a representative to Target's shareholders meeting to find out why Target, I guess bigwigs, think their share prices are dropping. I'll give you a hint. They don't think it's because of their bathroom policy. We will talk with them a little bit later in the program and give you a little bit more news about those types of politics. I guess we can call it transgender politics. Also, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals made a very interesting, sort of scary and disturbing ruling. They found that basically, they reversed a ruling that said the Second Amendment secured a person's right to carry a concealed weapon. They reversed that ruling, so it's a real challenge to the Second Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. I don't know whether this is going to go to the Supreme Court and how the justice situation plays into it, but Kelly Shackelford and I will unpack that a little bit later. And then certainly this has been a week for presidential politics, and we've seen Hillary Clinton clinch the nomination. This week, Kelly, you sent me sort of a funny email saying that you had just seen a headline on the Patriot Post that you thought was great. And actually, this would be a headline that the media might say if Hillary were a Republican. She's not. She's a Democrat. But the title of the piece was FBI Suspect Claims Democrat Nomination. Mm-hmm. That's pretty good.
That's, I guarantee you that would have been the headline if it were a Republican in that situation.
It would have been.
It would have been FBI suspect. Everything has to be colored. But yeah, that was.
I think we're going to get some news perhaps later today about what Bernie Sanders plans to do in the coming weeks. Hillary certainly has grabbed that nomination, but he's got some power with all of his delegates.
Absolutely.
Donald Trump, the Washington Post says, and I've posted this, doesn't have a national campaign, so the GOP is trying to run one for him. And this is interesting, I think, because he hasn't really amassed a national campaign. He doesn't have national fundraising. He's self-funded in the primaries, but he's not willing to do that in the general election. So he met for the very first time about fundraising, or his people did, with the RNC. And the Republican National Committee has sort of agreed to joint fundraising with him. But they're going to be in the driver's seat for a lot of the decisions. And I don't know if that's going to work. We'll see.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and he's just, I think there's been lots of stories on how he doesn't have like the campaign staff and the whole setup on sort of micro-targeting and being able to really focus on, get out the vote. So there's all these things that you need that help you that he doesn't have, because his whole deal was he was just kind of running his own campaign by himself and a few, people inside. And when you get to a national campaign, that's pretty hard to do. The only way you can win that way is if you sort of just almost go above everything and just sweep and just have such a popularity that you overcome all these normal things like get out the vote that are so important, or have people come along and provide those for you, which is, I think, what is being attempted now in all these different situations where he's got holes to fill.
The Republican National Committee says it's been developing its get out the vote efforts since the Romney debacle. And so we'll see how that works. And also, Donald Trump has been able to get so much free media. He sort of operated his campaign through Twitter and through the earned media. But, you can see it already this week with Hillary getting the nomination that they are pivoting towards her. And, I'm sure they'll cover Donald Trump to a great degree, but you just kind of wonder how he'll be treated in the media now that Hillary actually has the nomination.
Well, and I thought the media treatment of the Hillary nomination was really over the top, too. It reminded me, it was the first thing I've seen where it reminded me of the Barack Obama, talk in Denver, where it was almost like he's a god, and there were all these symbols and things. And it was almost like the media was, oh, it's the first time a woman has ever been nominated by a major party for president, and they just treated it like this. It was clear the bias in the way they were acting and the way they had acted would have acted if that would have been a woman on the Republican side. They don't talk about any of those things if it's on the other side. So it really is, the media bias is there with Barack Obama, and I'm sure it'll be there with Hillary Clinton because a large percentage of the media are Democrats. And so as a result, they tend to sway that way, and they don't even realize it because they're kind of amongst their friends, and they don't realize how they're not representing, the middle of the road American.
And Donald Trump is still calling her Crooked Hillary. Well, Kelly, before we go to a break, I saw an article that actually you co-wrote that was published in the Des Moines Register, and that's because the governor of Iowa actually issued a proclamation encouraging Iowans to participate in their 99-county Bible reading marathon, and I guess some people were upset about that. So you kind of made the case for it, didn't you, in this article? Yeah,
there were attacks. I think if I'm not mistaken, it was Freedom from Religion and the typical groups trying to say that, well, the governor, what he did is unconstitutional. He was encouraging a historical practice of a 99-county Bible reading. And you know what? I mean, back from George Washington, we've had presidential proclamations on prayer, on Bible reading, on fasting, on all these things. The government's not forcing anybody to do anything. They're saying this is a good thing. I think this is a good thing as the governor. And so when we have somebody like the governor in that case who's willing to do something right, when they get under attack, we have to make sure that somebody's standing with them and defeats these ridiculous attacks. And so we wrote an editorial that was published in the Des Moines Register, and I think the governor, if I'm not mistaken, they admitted that if they were sued, we were going to represent them at no charge, so we're going to cost the taxpayers any money. I doubt there'll be a lawsuit because the law is so clear on this, going all the way back to George Washington. But people can read that. I know they can go to pointofview.net, and you got the link right there. It's something that can be done everywhere. I mean, whether you're a governor or city council member or whatever official you are, you have a right to do these kind of proclamations to encourage things that are good, and don't let yourself be intimidated from doing good things.
I do remember back when the National Day of Prayer was actually challenged, and that was sort of put to rest.
That's right.
Well, that's a precedent for this,
and it's
right?
the same group, and that's the thing. Barack Obama came out and said and endorsed and spoke, and so it shows you how from George Washington to today, this has been a continual history in the country. It's never been unconstitutional. The founders would be shocked that this was being argued, but that shows you how far people are trying to move us or drift us from our religious heritage and our religious founding.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, stay with us. Next up, we will discuss this challenge to the Second Amendment that comes out of the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. Is that going to be appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court? And if so, what are its chances? We'll talk about it right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
For more than 200 years, candidates have been running for elections in districts that were gerrymandered. The term comes from the name of the governor of Massachusetts. In 1812, Governor Gerry signed a bill that changed the district lines for candidates. One of those contorted districts in the Boston area resembled a shape of a salamander, thus the term gerrymander was born. Recently, I learned that gerrymandering goes all the way back to the first congressional elections and involved two of the founders. One of them was James Madison, architect of the Constitution. The other was James Monroe. Both went on to become the fourth and fifth presidents of the United States. In the summer of 1788, Virginia became the 11th state to ratify the Constitution. Governor Patrick Henry called for elections and worked to prevent James Madison from serving in the Senate or the House of Representatives. First, he worked with the members of the Virginia legislature to deny Madison a Senate seat. Back in those days, the legislature selected the U.S. senators. Next, he worked to deny Madison a seat in the House of Representatives. Patrick Henry convinced the Virginia legislature to draw the 5th district line so that they included both Madison's home and Monroe's home. the two friends were forced to compete against each other. During the election, they traveled together and debated each other at various gatherings. Through hard and smart campaigning, Madison managed to defeat Monroe and then serve in Congress. There is a bright side to all of this. During the debates with Monroe, Madison realized how important a Bill of Rights would be. Some of the voters wanted such protection, so he made a campaign promise that he would support a Bill of Rights when elected to Congress. This is one campaign promise that was kept. Within 6 months, Madison pushed through the Bill of Rights, which were later ratified. I suppose you can say that good things sometimes do come from districts that have been gerrymandered. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For more information about issues covered on Viewpoints, visit pointofview.net. Pointofview.net.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Welcome back to Point of View. It's your Friday weekend edition, and Kelly Shackelford is in studio with me. The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, as I mentioned in the first segment, reversed a decision that had previously found that the Second Amendment was alive and well, securing a person's right to carry a concealed weapon outside of the home. Now, Kelly Shackelford, we know why it's important not to replace Antonin Scalia during the Obama term. And as a matter of fact, you kind of think back over some of Chelsea Clinton's fairly recent comments about her mother and how anti-gun she really is. So if we had a Hillary presidency. And there was a case out in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. The ruling came down yesterday. Unpack it a little bit to us. I know that one of the attorneys that we love, Paul Clement, actually argued this case. The Ninth Circuit ruled badly, and of course that affects the states in the Ninth Circuit.
Right.
But if this were to go to the Supreme Court, it's a little scary.
Yeah, and the way this works is when you go to the Federal Court of Appeals, you get 3 judges at random from the Ninth Circuit, which is not going to be a good random draw for you in the Ninth Circuit because they're much more liberal. And after that, though, you can do a special procedure that's called en banc or en banc, depending upon how you want to pronounce it, where you have all the judges of the Federal Court of Appeals. That is very rare. Usually the judges will only do that if they think there's something really important that they all need to sit for. And it's less, for instance, than the number of arguments before the Supreme Court every year. I mean, it's very rare.
Really?
And so what happened here is the court took this en banc, the Ninth Circuit. Again, Ninth Circuit is out of San Francisco, if that tells you anything. And they ruled 7-4 that citizens did not have a right under the Second Amendment to have a concealed carry, which and it's not like they're for open carry. Right? I mean, what they're essentially...
That's already illegal.
Yeah, what they're really saying is you there's no right for you to own, a firearm. So this is a huge deal. Now, as you said, to me what this does is it really puts the focus on the election. Because whoever the next president is, I mean, this can go one way or the other. Scalia's appointment will either probably end up with us having 5 people on the court who think that citizens don't have any rights under the Second Amendment to own a firearm, or it'll go the opposite direction and it'll be 5 that say, well, of course, that's what the Second Amendment says. So this, for everybody who cares about gun rights, this really, I think, highlights a huge issue that I don't think there's any doubt about the candidates on this. I mean, people have a lot of doubts about Trump, but he carries a weapon. He's mentioned that before. He's been real strong on that, and Hillary Clinton has been obviously on the opposite side on that. So this would have a huge impact as far as who they would appoint, and I think that would be that's going to determine how the Second Amendment, whether it's going to be erased like the Ninth Circuit, and depending upon the timing, I'm not exactly sure. I'd have to look. It might be that by the time this case gets there, the next president would have had a chance to do that appointment. So, I mean, I think this very case might be the one that goes up there and is decided one way or the other.
Well, this is what Chelsea, first daughter, said about her mother. This was at an event in Maryland. This is what sort of is some people disturbed. She said, "It matters to me that my mom also recognizes the role the Supreme Court has when it comes to gun control. With Justice Scalia on the bench, one of the few areas where the court actually had an inconsistent record relates to gun control." And then she went on to say that all the big gun control groups who endorse Hillary, of course, say the next ruling will be definitive. "It matters to me," said Chelsea, "that my mom is the only person running for president who not only consistently makes that connection, but also has a strong record on gun control and standing up to the NRA." And of course, the NRA has made a statement condemning this ruling. Kelly, I think the question I have is, you said maybe 5-4. Where does Justice Kennedy stand on gun rights?
Well, I think on the Heller decision, I think you had you had good people. I mean, the conservatives were on the same side, but you had 4 who were in the dissent who didn't think that people had an individual right to own a firearm under the Second Amendment. So that's what this case is all about. And the Ninth Circuit obviously came out the way I think many would expect it to. But that's going to be decided by the Supreme Court for the whole country, and that's going to depend upon the next justice. And again, I think the next president is probably going to have maybe 3.
Considering the ages.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I just was in the Supreme Court and was with the justices at dinner, and I mean, look, there's some people who are very up in age, and I think the odds are the next president will probably have 3 appointments, which is a huge deal and will really affect the court.
All right, so yeah, that's right. You did mention to me last time I saw you that you were going to, since you're the member of the Historical Society for the Supreme Court, you were actually going to be with the justices. So how was that? Good.
Yeah, I of all things, the person I sat next to and had discussions during the night was Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Really?
So anyway, but it's a good event and a good purpose, and the history of the court I think is very important, and that we not forget. I mean, that the rule of law is what makes us really different from most countries around the world. And so this presidency, though, is really going to have a huge impact on that. And so people that say, like, this is where I don't get the people that are like the never Trump people that I just can't vote for him. I'll wait 4 years. I'm like, if you wait 4 years, it won't matter who's president, because the court is going to be probably 7-2. And so you've really got to look at the issue of the court, because I think that is the biggest thing really about who the next president is.
A lot of people said, because I did a show in Kirby's absence a couple of weeks ago where we had somebody sort of unpack the different names on the list that Donald Trump put out of possible picks or picks like those picks. And a lot of people have written, you can just stuff that because we don't believe anything he says. I mean,
Right.
Especially a lot of the never Trump people will say that. And I didn't really get to ask you about that. I mean, what do you think about, I know that the list is pretty good, although there were a couple people we had concerns with, like Pryor.
Right.
But as far as the tone, the type of person that are on that list, do you believe that Donald Trump will stick with that promise?
I mean, I don't know for sure. I don't know him personally. I know I'm going to meet him, in a week and a half or so. My guess is yes, because I don't think that this is a huge issue for him personally. I mean, I think his issues are more on the business side and the economy and things that he understands. I think he's publicly, nobody has ever done this. I mean, this is so much further than anybody else, that I think it's a great thing. And what he's done by by putting this list out is not only showed these are the type of people, and this is who I'm choosing Scalia from, this list, but it also shows kind of where he will rely upon his information, because obviously he doesn't know the answers to this, right? This is like most things. So what you want to know is, if he were president, where would he go?
Who's going to help him figure out who to nominate?
This came from the Federalist Society and the Heritage Foundation. And so, if that's where he ends up getting information for judges, I mean, I don't know how we could, hope for anything better as far as the source of that information. So I really do feel like he will, do what he said on that. And again, because I don't think this is the number one issue to him, and I think he knows that he's not an expert on this. And so I think that's why he's been willing to reach out, get help, and even say, here's who I would go with, which, again, no president has ever done.
We had George W. Bush say in his campaign that he was going to pick justices in the tradition of Scalia and Thomas. And who was his first nominee? It was Harriet Miers, who we just didn't even know where she would rule. And the places that she did rule, she seemed fairly sort of moderate and not that much of a constitutionalist type, originalist type justice.
If
was that his first one?
No, I think his first one was Roberts.
Was it Roberts
I think
before
so.
her, and then we got Alito
right after? Yeah. It was the Harriet Miers.
That's right, and she was pulled then because of these same groups kind of rose up.
Yes, and look, Roberts has obviously disappointed people on the Obamacare decisions. He's been fairly good on most everything else, and is widely seen as a very strong conservative justice. So that was considered a good pick. The Harriet Miers was another one of these where Bush, kind of like Cheney, said, well, I really know her and I trust her, instead of picking, and in fact, the neat thing about that decision was, until then, the method for all Republicans was, do not pick anybody with a record because they'll be attacked. After the Harriet Miers thing, Alito had such a huge record that they realized we can pick people with a record that show where they stand.
Ladies and gentlemen, stick with us. We will continue discussing this issue, and we'll take your calls after this.
Did you know there's an approved healthcare choice just for Christians that's founded on the timeless principles in God's Word? It's not insurance. It's MediShare. Over 189,000 believers across America who love God and share each other's healthcare bills. It's about half the cost of health insurance, and you never pay for medical practices that go against your Christian beliefs. Best of all, the healthcare law includes a special provision for MediShare members, so you don't have to buy insurance or face penalties. MediShare is affordable healthcare without compromise.
Learn how thousands of Christians can help you save on your healthcare. For your free information guide, call 855-BIBLE-11. Not available in Montana. MediShare, affordable biblical healthcare. Call 855-BIBLE-11. That's 855-BIBLE-11.
Cast your vote today for Point of View Radio. Please become a monthly partner at pointofview.net, pointofview.net, or call 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, is Penna Dexter.
And it's Friday Weekend Edition. Kelly Shackelford, President and CEO of First Liberty Institute, is in studio with me, and we are talking about the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals en banc ruling that affects the Second Amendment, or at least addresses an area of it. It's under fire, and the vote was 7-4 in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals in San Francisco. It upheld a California law that requires gun owners to show a good reason before they can get a license to carry a concealed handgun.
Think about that.
They've got to make the case. They've got to get a note from the doctor or
from
whatever.
the government. You have to prove to the government that you have a good reason for having a firearm.
Great, just what we want.
I mean, if there's anything that's backwards about what the Second Amendment says and what that says, I mean, that to me that says it all.
Yeah.
I mean,
so it's a good cause is the term. And apparently what happened was this was sort of originated in San Diego and Yolo counties, where someone challenged that law that said you had to have a good cause. And San Diego and Yolo counties, I guess there, in that case, they agreed with the plaintiffs. And then it went to the Ninth Circuit. Am I correct? Or is it the panel in the Ninth Circuit?
The panel in the Ninth Circuit
agreed with the plaintiffs.
Mm-hmm.
But now the en banc, the full court, has reversed this, and
which really is it really is. But this is what they do. They don't care what the precedent is, what Heller really said. They're going to try to push the envelope, and unfortunately, that's what the Ninth Circuit has done in a number of situations. We had our Mount Soledad case went up there.
Yeah.
The Veterans Memorial, the Cross. Well, we had just been up there. We'd been to the U.S. Supreme Court just a year earlier over the Mojave Desert Cross. And the Supreme Court said 5-4, you don't tear that down. That's not unconstitutional. Well, they just completely ignored that decision and said, well, it really didn't apply because there was this one little piece of evidence that they had in their case that wasn't talked about in that case. And then they just ruled the opposite. So they're trying to push the envelope here. And again, that will depend upon who's on the court when you have this ninth justice who will be appointed.
Yeah, as you mentioned, this is definitely an election issue because who's on the court's going to matter. Also, just thinking about the platform for the Democrats, there was a statement made by Bonnie Schaefer. She is a philanthropist, very much on the left. She's a member of the platform committee for the Democrats. She'll be helping to write their platform. And this is what she says about this issue.
I do believe that you're absolutely correct. Not just keeping the guns out of the hands of mentally ill people and criminals, but I really don't personally think anyone should have a gun. I mean, that's just my own, philosophy. Nothing is ever solved, when you have a gun in your hand, except, the worst possible scenario.
Yeah, so the self-defense evidently is not solving anything.
Well, really, statistics show that the more guns that there are out there, the less crime there is.
Yeah, I mean, people have to have a right to defend themselves. That's very scary. But boy, you want to see a difference. Look at the platforms between the two parties and figure out where you line up, because the platforms are, usually pretty starkly different. I mean, on a lot of issues, but the gun, the Second Amendment is definitely an area where you have a huge difference. You have a person on this platform that thinks no one should have a firearm, which of course means only the criminals will have the firearms. And then on the other side, you've got, on the Republican platform, very strong on the Second Amendment rights of people to own firearms. So very distinct positions on that issue.
Polar opposites.
And it'll be affected greatly by who's appointed to the Supreme Court.
Let's open up the phones, 800-351-1212. What do you think of this ruling? And going forward, what do you think will happen? And Kelly, that's what I want to ask you because, they might appeal the ruling, but if they appeal the ruling and Hillary wins and we get a liberal in Justice Scalia's place, it would have been better not to appeal the ruling because it would only affect the western states and not the whole country.
Right. And nobody's going to know that. They're going to have to appeal before they know, I would imagine, November the 8th or whatever the date of the election is this year, I think. They're not going to be able to wait. Well, I mean, it's possible they could do some sort of motion for rehearing and
kind of stall it out a little bit.
Yeah, but I don't think they can stall it that long. I think they're going to have to probably go ahead and appeal what's called a writ of certiorari, where you ask the Supreme Court and you start that process, and they're not going to know what kind of court they have.
Very interesting. I don't know who is behind these people. The case was in San Diego, and then Kamala Harris, the Attorney General of California, took it up because San Diego wasn't going any further on it. But the state of California, of course, took it up and challenged it. So,
well, and the fact that Paul Clement did the argument, Paul is a very good friend of mine, and he's the best at this level. And so an en banc argument, you know that Paul Clement did an excellent job. So it's not like they didn't have the ability to know all the information and know what the law really says. But that circuit's wanted to go in a direction that it wanted to go. It's the most overturned circuit in the country. It's from it's from out of San Francisco. And again, a lot of people go, oh, well, it's the Ninth Circuit. But still, it's setting up an issue that I think will end up being decided for the whole country.
It's definitely set up an issue. I'd love to hear Donald Trump speak about it. I'm sure he will. Hopefully he does. And ends up, perhaps starting to make some more serious comments on some of these substantive issues.
I think the reporters are doing their job. We would have already heard by now. You would think both of them would be asked about this.
Yeah.
Because this is going to the Supreme Court, and here's an issue where it's probably 4-4 right now at the Supreme Court, and the next president's going to determine this. So let's let them speak on what they think about that decision. They should, if there's a reporter out there, ask the question to the candidates, because this is definitely one that they need to be asked.
800-351-1212. We are taking your calls on this issue. We'd love to hear from you, and we'll begin taking those calls in just a moment. And also you can weigh in on presidential politics, because this has been quite a week. I mean, it's sort of been a decisive week for the Democrats, I would say. And very interestingly also, the White House spokesman actually admitted that there is, and he used the word criminal investigation going on against Hillary. And also we've seen now an quote-unquote enemies list coming out of the IRS that's been released.
Yes.
So we're starting to see some of these just very disturbing sides from the left coming out in this election. And yet we're seeing this media coronation of Hillary. I mean, I don't know what newspaper it was in, but when she was wearing white with her arms out, it was almost like she had a halo over her head, accepting her position as the nominee.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things happening right now. I know there was a poll that came out yesterday, a Fox poll, that showed over the past, 2 or 3 weeks or maybe month, that Trump had slipped. It was like neck and neck, and then he was down maybe 3 points. I think he was ahead, 45-42, and then it went to him being behind 42-39. The interesting thing was Hillary's numbers did not move. In fact, her numbers were that she even decreased more in trustworthiness. So she's hit, about the bottom as anybody could hit as far as trustworthiness, but the Trump statements on the judge had created some negative feedback on him. So I think it's just going to be fascinating watching this race. The other thing, though, is Bernie Sanders. I think Bernie Sanders clearly is at a different place on the issues than Hillary, and wants a Democratic Party that moves in that direction. And so I think what's going to happen is, there's going to be some demands about the platform and different things, because the focus of the Bernie Sanders crowd is going to be the future of the Democratic Party, and essentially that they think it needs to go much further to the left, which is amazing. But that's the battle that's going to go on there, and if not, I think Bernie Sanders is going to be a
He'll be a thorn in their side.
He'll be a thorn in their side, but so they're going to have to figure that out. And I think what's fascinating is Bernie Sanders going to ask for something that's gettable, or is he going to push for something he knows he won't get, so he can sort of set himself up for being the future savior of the Democratic Party?
He's pretty old, though.
He is, but that's going to be what's going to be interesting, because I hear a lot of Bernie Sanders supporters saying things publicly that are really unrealistic. Obviously Hillary won the nomination; she's not going to give up all the issues.
But she's definitely made promises far to the left of what she would have otherwise made. So
she has, and Bernie Sanders is going to speak at the convention. There's going to be all kinds of things that are happening, but there's going to be some real trading going on there.
Big meetup yesterday between Hillary and Elizabeth Warren, too, which probably signals some liberalism. We're taking your calls after this.
There's a new study out showing that for the first time since 1880, young adults are more likely to live at home with mom and dad than in their own households with a spouse or romantic partner. Pew Research Center analyzed the census data and found that in 2014, living with parents became the most common living arrangement for millennials. According to the report, among 18 to 34-year-olds, 32.1% were back home with parents, while 31.6% were married living with their spouse or unmarried and cohabiting with a boyfriend or girlfriend. The rest live with roommates, other family members, or alone. This brings to mind a couple of questions. First, is this a blip or a trend? It's a trend. The share of young adults living with their parents has been edging up since the 60s, dropping some in the 90s, but rising sharply after 2000. We could also ask, is this by choice or of necessity? Both. There's been a dramatic drop in the number of young people who settle down with a spouse or live-in romantic partner before age 35. Millennials are choosing to marry later or not at all. The report cites the postponement of, if not retreat from, marriage as an important factor in the uptick in young adults living with their folks. Studies show most still want to tie the knot someday, but there's a growing attitude among millennials that you've got to meet certain financial goals before marrying. That's in contrast to previous generations who may have struggled financially during early adulthood. We did without, but we did it married. So, yes, the trend toward young adults moving back home results from certain choices they're making, but it also rises from economic necessity. The worsening employment picture for young men in recent years is the subject of great concern, and this study showed more young men than young women living with their parents. Its authors point out that the share of young men with jobs peaked around 1980 at 84%. In 2014, only 71% of 18 to 34-year-old men were employed. More Black and Hispanic young people are unemployed and living with parents than whites, but the trend is up for all demographic groups. College graduates fare better in the labor market and establish their own households at higher rates, but student debt is also keeping more of them under their parents' roofs. These results, fueled by a sluggish jobs picture, dovetail with the popularity of out-of-the-box presidential candidates who promise to change it. Polls show the support for Donald Trump skews male, white, and poor. There is a bright side. Family togetherness can be a good thing. Maybe a time to work through some lingering immaturities. And better to be home with mom and dad than living in a non-marital sexual relationship. Kids, if you're in this spot, love on your folks and help out a lot. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Welcome back to Point of View. I'm Penna Dexter, Kelly Shackelford, First Liberty Institute in studio with me. We're talking about the challenge to the Second Amendment coming out of the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, and we're taking your calls. Let's take one from Steve in New Hampshire. Hi, Steve. Thanks for calling in.
Hi, how you doing?
Great.
Listen, I had a question about where did the Attorney General suddenly jump back into this case? I thought originally she thought it would be a slam dunk in favor of gun control on the original case, and when it came out the other way, she had kind of whined about it on the press, the fact that she had missed out on being the signatory to the case, and now with this en banc.
We've lost you, but what happened was this, as I said, was a California case. Gun owners challenged the law after being denied permits to carry concealed guns in San Diego County. And they were trained in gun use, Kelly. They were cleared in their background checks. But they could not give those reasons, the just cause reasons that would convince the authorities there that they could carry concealed firearms. So the 3-judge panel of the Ninth Circuit decided 2-1 that the counties had to relax their rules for the permits. So they decided really the right way, according to the Second Amendment. That was back in 2014, I think. The law in California said it was a very strict law that took away the rights to carry unloaded guns openly in public and tote ammunition separately. So I guess it just waited around for a while, and then the Attorney General, Kamala Harris, who could be the next senator in California, she challenged it on behalf of the state. She took it up again. Do you know why? Do you know?
No, I imagine what happened is, I think I heard the county. This is the county. When they filed their lawsuit, they sued the county that had the law that said that you had to show good cause. Okay, and when the county lost in that decision 2-1 at the Federal Court of Appeals, evidently they decided, okay, we've done what we could to defend this, and plus San Diego is a little more conservative than a lot of the rest of the state, so maybe that was there was some political pressure, who knows, but they said we're done. And that's evidently when the Attorney General came in and said, hold on a second, we want to continue to take this thing up. And so my guess is some sort of motion was filed to the court to allow the Attorney General to argue in behalf of the law, since the county wasn't going to go any further.
We are taking your calls, 800-351-1212. We've got a full bank of phones, so wait, and when one drops off, you can jump in. Let's go to Travis in the state of Texas. Hi, Travis. You're on Point of View.
Hey. First off, we need to look back and see what's going on with this. We've got our rights taken away piece by piece, little by little, every year. And it boils down to is the silent majority needs to stand up and vote. I can't stress that enough. I'm young. I've voted ever since I turned 18. I'm only 23 now, but every election I voted in. This gun thing, everybody's saying, oh, they're taking our guns. They're taking it because we're allowing it. People need to stand up, get out to the voting booths, vote however you choose to vote, but vote. And when something don't go your way, don't whine about it. Have a solution about it.
I will say that the gun rights issue is an issue that does bring people out. Sometimes complacent people, when they see their guns threatened, there's a whole contingent of people in this country who that's their main issue. And so that could, sort of put a fire under them.
Yeah, and
I hope so.
And it's a good point, too, because, the over and over and over again, we find out that you think, well, the good people that go to my church, I'm sure they're all voting and they're all registered, and most of them aren't. A majority of them aren't. So there's all these people that aren't voting, and the result is that other people bring very different values in, and that's why you have some of the leaders you have, is because the people who know right from wrong aren't voting and making sure that those are applied to the candidates.
Hey, Travis, thanks for your call. I think when we look at people and their propensity to vote, it worries me just a little bit that Christians might not have the enthusiasm because Donald Trump is such a flawed candidate. Let's just be honest. And that even last week, as we talked about Christian leaders getting behind him or at least talking to him, and I know you're going to be speaking with him and asking him a lot of questions. That enthusiasm factor might not be there. But first of all, we have to think about issues like the courts. The president has an impact that goes well beyond his own term, 1 or 2 terms in office because of their appointments of Supreme Court and other justices and judges. But also the down ballot races. If we don't have that big of a stake in the presidential race, if we just don't care or aren't enthusiastic, we still should vote, and we should be informed about all the other races that affect us, because really sometimes, Kelly, it's the elected officials closest to us in our cities, in our states, who affect our lives more than the national office holders.
And it breaks my heart because, again, I assume most of the point of view listeners, because this is a Christian talk show, go to church somewhere. And if they're not voting, then what's happening almost assuredly is somebody either from their church or from a church very much like their church has gone to church, they've been praying, and they've been convicted. They felt that God is telling them, as much as they don't want to, because nobody really wants to stick their neck out there and get, shot at and everything, as far as your family getting dragged through the mud and everything. But somebody has decided, I'm supposed to run for office because I'm supposed to make sure and go and be a servant leader that makes a difference. What's sad is that those people, here's somebody from your church essentially up there for the race, doing everything they can. They're working really hard. They're taking all kinds of shots. And then we don't have we're not even willing to go vote. Yeah. I mean, it's really sad to me that in the body of Christ that occurs. I mean, people should go and vote. They should take those values. It's such a privilege. We all take it for granted because we grew up in this, but it's such a privilege. People should do that. And I think it's, obviously, so, under the president, there's a lot of other races with a lot of good people running and a lot of big differences. And I think, again, even if you're looking at the presidency, to start looking at the issues that really matter and the things that will affect your life and, then start parsing those between the candidates. And I think you can always come up with a choice. I'm not saying the person is perfect. They never are. I'm not saying you might even think they're good, but one is almost always better than the other if you really do a comparison of the issues and how it's going to impact those issues that you really think are the most important.
Yeah, and we also have to remember that once the election happens, we're not done. We're supposed to stay involved in the process and stay involved in the issues, and that's why Point of View exists. That's why we bring you programs like this one every day. That's why we have the resources at our website at pointofview.net that help you stay informed. Because we want to help you to not just be involved during elections, although that's important, but also the rest of the time. Because governing is sort of a 24/7 process, and citizens are supposed to be involved in America.
And I would challenge everybody out there, if you're not sure if you're registered, make sure you're registered. It's really easy to do. I don't know, this Point of View might even have an ability for people to do that, but it's easy to do. There's a little postcard in your post office or in your library that you can fill out and just put in the mail, and you're registered. It's not hard. So if you've moved,
but you've got to do it. You have a time frame before the election. You've got to get it
exactly.
done.
So now's a great time to make sure of that. And maybe you've moved and you just forgot that you haven't registered. And if you don't do that, you're not going to be able to vote because you live too far away to go to that old place to vote. So just make sure you're registered, make sure people in your family are registered, and be a good steward of those freedoms that we've been given.
Next hour, we're going to talk about the Target shareholders meeting. What's their explanation for their drop in stock prices? We'll take your calls. If you're on the line, stay with us. We'll get it later.
10 years ago, did you think the Supreme Court would ever dare to redefine marriage? That a president would threaten schools unless they permit males to shower with your daughters, told hospitals they must do abortions and sex change procedures or lose federal money? Did you honestly foresee any of this? We must stand together today and defend our liberties, or in the next few years, the nation will be transformed in ways we can't imagine. Please, please, join Kirby and Point of View Radio and defend what's right. We have a June 30th deadline, the end of our fiscal year, and it's critical we finish this month on firm financial terms. Partner with us. Give the most generous gift you can, and right now, it will be doubled up to $10,000. Give online at pointofview.net or call 1-800-347-5151. Thank you for standing with us to defend faith and family. Pointofview.net and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank y'all for everything you do each day to inform Christian families and our community about the things we can do, and just the way you're so informative. I listen to you daily and love you guys and appreciate you so much.
God bless you, Kirby, for keeping this show so on track and for the decades of wonderful help to this nation that Point of View has been. We're all big fans of your work, and we pray that God will just prosper it.
As a Christian, over the years that I've followed this program, I am constantly challenged to be on guard and to evaluate what's going on. And if for no other reason, to protect the caliber and the truth of your programming, I need to participate and to back your program financially to ensure that the truth stays out there for people to hear, to view, and to be a part of.
This is Point of View Radio.
Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging. Apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Penna Dexter.
Thank you very much for joining us, ladies and gentlemen, for the second hour of Point of View. It's our Friday weekend edition, and for most of the show, the bulk of today's show, we've been talking about a challenge coming out of the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals to the Second Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, but many of the issues we discuss here on Point of View actually involve challenges to the First Amendment, the freedom of religion. And it was interesting to see in today's Wall Street Journal, in the editorial section, a piece called Freedom of Worship Isn't Enough. And it starts out, immigrants studying for the naturalization tests often confront a basic question: what are two rights of everyone living in the U.S.? And they have a lot of correct answers. It could be freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, and bearing arms. Freedom of worship is also counted. But this was challenged by a member of Congress. Actually, he's a senator now, James Lankford of Oklahoma. On March 28th, they actually changed and revised the wording in this test, thanks to a request by this senator, James Lankford, who said really the correct term should be freedom of religion, not freedom of worship. Because the term freedom of worship, although it's widely used, this administration has made very clear that when they say freedom of worship, Kelly, they mean it's sort of confined to your church or your home, but not your daily life out in public.
Right. And the Constitution says the free exercise of religion. And that's what it says, which means actually doing out in public and other places following your faith. So that's a big one. You know, I remember it was in the Visitor Center. I forget what they had, but they had the national motto, and it wasn't even the national motto until I forget which congressman. It might have been.
I don't remember the congressman either, but I remember it was several years ago, and I remember the issue.
Could have been Randy Forbes or whatever. The "In God We Trust," and so I mean, all these things. You know, we need to be diligent. You know, thank goodness for the Oklahoma.
James Lankford.
Thank goodness for him, because look what he's done, and not only that, he's now getting the Wall Street Journal to write about how freedom of worship is not enough. And that's great. Same thing. That's why we did our campaign on the "In God We Trust." Is we had Freedom from Religion sending all these threatening letters to the police chiefs and the sheriffs and everything. And we represent a number of them, but their whole goal was to shut down the use of the national motto. So we thought, well, let's turn this around on them. And so I don't know how many, but we've had so many people call our office and say, "Hey, I hear I can get up to 5 of those window clings for free." And we're like, sure, just they can go to our website at firstliberty.org, and it's most of the way down towards the bottom, but they'll see how they can get the window clings, or they can just call our office. But I love the idea of taking proactive, doing something, and people, like, especially if they're out there and they say, well, I can't go into court and I can't fight any of these issues, or I'm not a congressman or a senator, I can't do what Lankford did. But you know what you can do? You can get a window cling for, your cars and your family, or something. You can do something to get the word out on really what this country is all about, which is "In God We Trust."
Yeah, it's sort of the old adage, use it or lose it, too. I mean, sometimes we don't have the opportunities in our daily life, although more of us are having our religious liberties challenged. But you can use it by just saying it.
Yes.
And displaying it. So pointofview.net, you can click through to First Liberty Institute, or just go directly to firstliberty.org. Is that correct? Firstliberty.org?
Yeah, firstliberty.org.
Okay. Also...
spelled out.
And I'm taking your calls here at Point of View, and I will take one in just a minute, but I also wanted to throw out another issue, and that is, you'll remember during Obama's reelection bid that there was this stonewalling by the IRS of the approval of the nonprofit status of lots and lots of groups. And Lois Lerner lost her job, but she still got a generous pension. And, they've been investigating this. And now the list of quote unquote enemies, these groups that had their applications stonewalled, has been revealed. It's 466 organizations. I think 40 were first revealed, but 426 more were revealed. Oh, actually 33 have the word patriot. 60 of the groups in the list released have the word T. Mm-hmm. and 13 had the word 9/12 in their name, which was a movement started by conservatives. So it was, there are some liberal groups in there, but it's mostly conservative groups who were targeted.
Right. It's pretty clear what's going on. This lawsuit, I hope, is going to more and more reveal the truth, because what's been going on is, this is one of the things that Americans definitely, and that's why they made it a felony to use the IRS to attack people politically, is because this is something that came up, I know, under Nixon, and we don't ever want the government to be able to do that. No, every citizen, I don't care whether you're left or right, conservative, liberal, libertarian, this is something everybody should be able to unite behind. This is really scary. If somebody who doesn't like you or your politics can use the IRS to destroy your life, that shouldn't happen in this country. And so that's why I think this is so important that this lawsuit continues, that this information come out, and I hope that there's eventually some accountability for people like Lois Lerner for doing this.
Absolutely. 800-351-1212. We're taking your calls. Let's go to Jan in the state of Arizona. Hi, Jan. Thanks for calling.
Hi. I'm just calling real quick because these issues I know are really pressing, the First Amendment and the Second Amendment rights that are really on the verge of being taken away. And I think it stresses that much more that we need to vote. And I think I get really concerned when I hear people say Donald Trump is flawed, or this is not a candidate that we want to have, really in office. He's not perfect. And I realize he's not perfect. He definitely was not my first choice for to be president or to be running. But he is the choice that we need to make. I just feel it's clear a third party is not going to win. We've got Hillary or we've got Trump, and we know that Hillary is not what we want. We know that Trump at least is a part of the Republican Party. I would hope that the Republican Party would have some influence as far as the platform to make sure he kind of stays on task with the platform. But I just don't want to ever come across in our Christian as Christians that, we're saying, golly, this is like a flawed guy, and, it's just we got to hold our nose and vote, even though, he's not our first choice. But by golly, he's going to do a lot better with Supreme Court justices, especially with all of our rights being on the line. I think he's going to do a lot better, of course, than Hillary will. So, golly, I would just like to encourage people, get out and vote, and don't think that we're going to win by trying to get some kind of a third party or write-in vote or something like that. We have got to be serious about this and hopefully, get somebody in there that at least we know may tip the scales to the conservative.
Jan, thanks for your call, and it's a good one. I think that this is a really rough year for people. They're having a lot of trouble. I hate to say it. I know you don't want me to say he's a flawed candidate, but he is. He's a flawed candidate, and people are going to have to hold their nose. But but you're right. People should vote, and politics sometimes is the art of being well short of perfection. We will continue this discussion. Third parties, Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton, IRS, gun rights, they're all on the table today on our Friday Weekend Edition. I'm Penna Dexter. Kelly Shackelford is here, and we'll be right back.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
You know, for more than 200 years, candidates have been running for elections in districts that were gerrymandered. The term comes from the name of the governor of Massachusetts. In 1812, Governor Gerry signed a bill that changed the district lines for candidates. One of those contorted districts in the Boston area resembled the shape of a salamander, thus the term gerrymander was born. Recently, I learned that gerrymandering goes all the way back to the first congressional elections and involved two of the founders. One of them was James Madison, architect of the Constitution. The other was James Monroe. Both went on to become the fourth and fifth presidents of the United States. In the summer of 1788, Virginia became the 11th state to ratify the Constitution. Governor Patrick Henry called for elections and worked to prevent James Madison from serving in the Senate or the House of Representatives. First, he worked with the members of the Virginia legislature to deny Madison a Senate seat. Back in those days, the legislature selected the U.S. senators. Next, he worked to deny Madison a seat in the House of Representatives. Patrick Henry convinced the Virginia legislature to draw the 5th district line so that they included both Madison's home and Monroe's home. The two friends were forced to compete against each other. During the election, they traveled together and debated each other at various gatherings. Through hard and smart campaigning, Madison managed to defeat Monroe and then serve in Congress. There is a bright side to all of this. During the debates with Monroe, Madison realized how important a Bill of Rights would be. Some of the voters wanted such protection, so he made a campaign promise that he would support a Bill of Rights when elected to Congress. This is one campaign promise that was kept. Within 6 months, Madison pushed through the Bill of Rights, which were later ratified. I suppose you can say that good things sometimes do come from districts that have been gerrymandered. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For more information about issues covered on Viewpoints, visit pointofview.net. Pointofview.net.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Welcome back to Point of View. I'm Penna Dexter. Kelly Shackelford is here. And a little bit later in the program, we're going to have a guest from the National Center for Public Policy Research who is going to report on the annual shareholders meeting that took place in California for Target, the retail chain. It's the first time that Target's management came face-to-face with basically the decision it made when it entered the culture wars in April, announcing it would respect its customers by letting everyone use the fitting rooms and restrooms of their choice, regardless of the views of the other customers using those facilities. Target's seen some drop, and it's a drastic drop, actually, in the share prices. There may be several reasons for it, but we're gonna find out what happened at that shareholders meeting. This group actually sent a representative, so that ought to be interesting. That's
I thought it was amazing
program.
what they said. I mean, people are going to have to wait to hear, but I mean, just breathtaking, the stupidity of. I mean, look, even if you're on the other side of the issue, why do you make your company about an issue that has nothing to do with your company? I mean, all you're doing is going to push more people away. So the whole thing is
political correctness is really a disease. It affects people's minds, I think. Ladies and gentlemen, we are taking your calls. But first, Kelly, just this talk about Trump. And there's one other thing about him, and that is that, he's just running such an out-of-the-box, sort of crazy-sounding campaign. Nothing that is conventional wisdom has worked, and yet he has succeeded and done so well in gaining the delegates and things. So, it's kind of fun to look at this in the light of God's sovereignty. And we always have to remember as believers that God is in control of the events. Of course, we're supposed to participate, and there's a dance in the way we participate and how God's sovereignty works. But, there's historical precedence for the idea that someone who is very flawed as a leader can end up being a force for good and used by God.
Well, I've heard, this is probably, I don't know how many times I've now heard Cyrus used with me, of people saying, well, look, I'm not a big fan of Donald Trump, but he could be a Cyrus. And I remember a little bit about that, but I just got an email from, and he hasn't given me permission to say on the air, it's a very well-known pastor nationally. And he just had a conversation on the air with somebody, and it just kind of all came out before he realized what he was saying, but he's very biblically solid. And it was a person who was very discouraged on the air about everything, and he started asking him about sovereignty. And he pointed out, he said, look, in chapter 45 of Isaiah, talking about God's sovereignty, the prophecy is having to do with King Cyrus. The Lord had revealed to Isaiah that the Lord was going to put into the mind of Cyrus not only to assist the Jews who are returning to Judea, but also to rebuild the temple. Again, this godless, king God was going to use for his purposes, right? And this prophecy to Isaiah came 2 centuries before Cyrus conquered Babylon and the Medes, and the Lord even revealed the king's name way before he was born. So this is what this pastor said. What is even more amazing is that God chose this pagan Gentile king to foreshadow Christ, the great deliverer. Though we have no evidence that Cyrus ever became a believer, God identified him as his, quote, shepherd in Isaiah 44:28, his anointed in 45:1, which can be translated as Messiah. So, and this guy he was talking to, it just like totally changed his attitude, because it just reminded him of God's sovereignty. And who's going to be president? I don't know. Can God use the president for his purposes? Might whichever person president, might this person be a Cyrus? Absolutely. So we need to do what we can, be responsible in our own part. But I just think I've heard a lot of people when they've in the conversation, it's just sort of a reminder that, Cyrus was a pretty bad guy in a lot of ways. I mean, you don't rule the Babylonians and not be a pretty bad guy, but God used him in incredible ways, to return God's people, to rebuild the temple, to really foreshadow Christ. I mean, God can do all kinds of things. So we might say this is not the way we would have done this election, but you know what? I bet we wouldn't have picked David the way God picked David, and they, ignore all the muscle guys and pick the guy that nobody would have picked. We wouldn't have had Jesus's lineage. If you look through in Matthew 1, it wouldn't have been through a prostitute, a Moabitess, all these people were mentioned in the line that almost make it look less glamorous. But God does things through.
And Jesus would have come as a conqueror rather than as a servant.
Right. And so sometimes what we think is maybe not God's way. And so we've got to just say, let's let God be God and let's do the best we can to be obedient to him. But realize, don't be despairing. We could have a Cyrus in this election. And the fact that we didn't end up with a strong biblical Christian leader doesn't mean that even greater things might happen through this other person if God wants to do that. And I've given a theory of how that could happen with a Donald Trump, okay? A guy who doesn't share a lot of our morals, but because he doesn't have expertise in a lot of these areas, could appoint very, very strong people in charge of these different areas, like, as I mentioned, the courts. If he's like, the courts is not my thing, I think I'll defer to the Federalist Society and the Heritage Foundation. Well, you're probably not going to get much better than that. So, I mean, God can certainly use all kinds of circumstances. I'm not saying he's going to. I'm not saying Trump's going to win. I don't think the odds are against Trump winning. But the point is, I think we can have great hope and know that God is sovereign and that God used Cyrus. He can use whoever is president. You pick somebody out of a hat. He could do incredible things through that person. And that might be exactly what's being set up right now.
800-351-1212. We're taking your calls. What do you think could Could Donald Trump actually be God's choice? This man who's not the man that the Christians probably would have seen as their number one candidate back 8 months ago is now looking like he's going to be the nominee of the Republicans and the one that many Christians, Bible believers, are going to have to think about voting for. So how does this fit in with the sovereignty of God? It's a good question. 800-351-1212. Let's go to Randy in the state of Texas. Hi, Randy. Randy, are you there? And if you are, turn down your radio. Okay, we're going to go on. Let's go to Marty in Georgia. Hi, Marty. Thanks for calling in.
Hey, guys. Glad to hear y'all this happening and enjoy listening to you. I'm probably confusing to a lot of people. I happen to be I'm actually a pastor that carries a gun. And a lot of people don't understand.
We know a few of those.
I don't have to use it at church, but, you don't never know what tomorrow may bring. But my thing is this. I watch Fox News quite a bit, and if I were to consider myself, which I'm not by any means, if I were to consider myself a liberal, and I were to consider myself going to look and vote Democratic because that's what liberals do, or Democrats vote for the people that are running the Democratic Party, whatever how you look at it, there's a lot of people that just vote party regardless. All right. If you watch the biased news, which may be one of your liberal channels compared to like a Fox News, or even watching Fox News, will what you would consider liberal channels ask Donald Trump a question, say about how he feels about gun control, and risk the chance of a lot of liberals hearing that they may lose their gun carrying license and swap over to the conservative side just because Trump wants them to keep their guns. In other words...
Yeah, because as I said earlier, there are a lot of single-issue voters in this country when it comes to the Second Amendment.
Right. I mean, it's not just conservatives. I mean, I know a lot of people that may not be as conservative as I am, but I live in Georgia. A lot of people around here have got guns. We're very responsible with them, and, there's crime rates where everybody lives. How we... But I don't watch the liberal channels, so I don't hear that. Well, the liberals are not going to listen to you guys, for the most part. So how do we bridge that gap? Because there's less...
We keep up the conversation.
Yeah, because we talk about it, you hear it, you talk to your people, because you probably know some people who are Democrat, just like all of us do, and you can ask them, hey, does this issue bother you? Is this a big issue to you?
And that's all I can do. That's exactly right. And, and you're right, and I appreciate, bringing that up.
You can also write letters to the editor for your liberal newspapers in your town. That's one way you get the issue out there.
We don't have a newspaper.
Thanks, Marty. I appreciate your call.
Y'all take care. All right. Bye-bye.
All right.
Ladies and gentlemen, we will continue to take your calls throughout the program, although next up we are going to bring in a guest, Amy Ridenour, to talk about the Target shareholder meeting. Ought to be interesting. We'll be right back.
Did you know there's an approved healthcare choice just for Christians that's founded on the timeless principles in God's Word? It's not insurance. It's MediShare. Over 189,000 believers across America who love God and share each other's healthcare bills. It's about half the cost of health insurance, and you never pay for medical practices that go against your Christian beliefs. Best of all, the healthcare law includes a special provision for MediShare members, so you don't have to buy insurance or face penalties. MediShare is affordable healthcare without compromise.
Learn how thousands of Christians can help you save on your healthcare. For your free information guide, call 855-BIBLE-11. Not available in Montana. MediShare, affordable biblical healthcare. Call 855-BIBLE-11. That's 855-BIBLE-11.
Cast your vote today for Point of View Radio. Please become a monthly partner at pointofview.net, pointofview.net, or call 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, is Penna Dexter.
Well, we are attempting to reach Amy Ridenour from the National Center for Public Policy Research to find out about the Target shareholder meeting. Apparently, they had a representative go there. His name is Justin Danoff, and he was extremely exasperated because he asked the CEO some questions and just didn't get the CEO named Brian Cornell that he has offended the sensibilities of millions of Americans and Target shoppers. And this Target boycott that American Family Association, Kelly, has put forward was actually very successful in the numbers of people that signed up. And then I know a lot of people that are boycotting Target that didn't ever sign up for a boycott. So right. I think, the fact that their bottom line is being affected is not surprising.
I don't either. I mean, whether people can connect it to that or not, I mean, I think spiritually people could, Mm-hmm. The thing about it is, it's just from a pure business standpoint, it just doesn't make any sense. The job of Target is not to take, are they going to come out next and say who they support for president? Are they going to, no, of course not. Why? Because they would make a lot of their customers angry and they'd say, we'll shop somewhere else. So this is what they're doing on this issue. And, if I was on the board, even if it was them taking the opposite, some opposite stance on something, I'd say, look, this is not our issue. Our issue is selling the things that we sell and, making good products and serving people in that way.
Yeah.
And so I would think that anybody on Wall Street should understand this is just about, being a successful company. So one of the quotes I saw, they went there and they made their statement, and then I think the response from somebody on the board or somebody with Target basically sort of painted all the people who disagreed with them in some very negative way. And the person came back with some statement like, do you not understand you've just sort of vilified a whole segment of consumers? You're calling them names, and I thought it was a really good point because
one wonders why they even insert themselves into this battle.
There's no reason for them to do this except if they want to hurt themselves financially. Again, they do it because they think it's some great moral, it's some great moral position. It's not. It's an immoral position. But if they're going to start taking great moral positions, then let's just go down the list and especially it's dumb for a place like Target because it's so easy for people to replace them. There are other stores that are very similar. They can just go to them, and that's what people are doing. And you would think they'd have enough sense to just for the sake of actually being responsible to their shareholders. I'm sure the shareholders of Target wish that they would not be in this political discussion.
I'm sure they do.
And but evidently they weren't willing to listen at this point.
The day that Target made the announcement of their bathroom policy, which basically said that grown men, they didn't say this, but they said that you can use the bathroom that comports with your gender identity and also the dressing room, which allows grown men to be in states of undress in front of young girls, basically in Target. And that made people upset. The boycott happened. Target's stock price was $83.98 the day of the announcement. This past Monday, it was $68.81, an 18% drop in 7 weeks. And so this organization, the National Center for Public Policy Research, says for Target to deny any correlation between its announcement and its tanking stock is ignorance of the highest form. Boy, that's an understatement of the year, but that's what they did. They denied any correlation, offending millions of investors and consumers, and then denying the financial implications borders on fiduciary negligence. Well, we're trying to get the chairman of this organization to talk about it. I'd love to hear just the ins and outs of the visit by them to the shareholders meeting. Hopefully we will sometime during the program. Or perhaps I'll be hosting a couple of days next week. If it doesn't happen today, we'll do it next week. But we are taking your calls, 800-351-1212. Let's go to Jeannie, who's waiting on the line. Hi, Jeannie. Thanks for calling in.
How are you?
Great.
I was afraid. I almost hung up because I was afraid we'd leave the subject, but people
All
who are
subjects
voting,
are on the table.
Okay. People who are voting Democratic evidently don't realize that the Democratic platform, and specifically Hillary Clinton, has come out against Israel so much. She's very pro-Palestinian, and I could give you some exact things, but I can't remember what they were, and I'm in my car. But if people vote for the Democratic, vote for Hillary, they're voting against Israel because the Democratic platform is against Israel. They're pro-Palestinian. You know what? The Bible says in 2 Chronicles 7:14, if my people, so it's God's people, we're the ones that hold what's going to happen in our hands. The way that we vote is going to cast whatever way it goes. If it goes against Palestine, against Israel, and if this administration destroys our country, it's our doing. It's not the world's doing, it's our doing. So we need to keep our act right. And I really believe that sooner or later, I think the Bible does say that if the whole world will come against Israel, and that's going to bring about all the bad stuff that's coming, and Jesus will come again. But if we vote and bring back a renewal, God will postpone that. We know it's going to eventually come anyway.
Jeannie, thanks for your call and bringing that issue up, especially in light of the fact that there was a terrible shooting in Tel Aviv this week. And to his credit, Donald Trump made a very good statement condemning that. And, it just comes down to the bottom line there. One side, and Dennis Prager said this, one side wants peace, the other does not. And there have been many opportunities for peace, even offers of a Palestinian state. But they don't take it because they don't want peace.
One of the things, I don't know if you've talked about this on the air or Kirby has, but that I read within the last 3 or 4 days, I think, was Dennis Prager wrote an article where he tried to communicate to his Never Trump friends. And he listed a number of those people, like George Will and people like that. And he wrote why, to him, that was, a position that really logic doesn't support. Fascinating. If people want to find that online, just look up Dennis Prager, and I'm sure they can find one of his more recent letters. But his
He's a
point,
thoughtful guy.
Yeah, his point was, look, this was not my guy. Donald Trump wasn't my guy. But I think not voting is a really bad decision, and logically just doesn't comport with people who are conservative or even libertarian. And so he kind of laid out his argument. I didn't agree with all of it, but I thought he had a lot of great points in his article.
We are taking your calls at 800-351-1212, and we brought up this topic of the sovereignty of God in this analogy of Cyrus, the Babylonian king. And Anne in Texas wants to talk about that. Hi, Anne.
Yeah, hi, Penna. Hi, Kelly.
Hi.
Hi. Yeah, I just wanted to talk about that because, I've heard so many rationalizations for why Christians should vote for Trump, and that one really gets to me, I think, the worst, because it's just an analogy that doesn't work. Cyrus was the king of another nation. He wasn't the king of Israel. And so, yes, God is sovereign. He can bring anybody.
But people were exiled into Babylon and had to live under this king, and that's kind of what we're talking about, is who God places you under people in situations that you would not choose, but he's sovereign. That's really the point we're making.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more on that. He is sovereign, but I just think right now, Trump has not been formally nominated. We need to continue putting pressure on the GOP to offer up a nominee who is just not going to be as wild and unpredictable and toxic as Trump.
Yeah. So I think those are descriptive terms that are true. But he's also amassed the delegates now, and we start to have to be realistic about it.
Yeah, I agree, but I just think that the time to fight, if there is any, is still now. And, we face that bridge, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it in July if we have to.
Yeah. Listen, thank you, Ann, for that.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are continuing to take your calls. Sort of interesting to banty this about. We will continue to do that for the remainder of the show. Again, the number is 800-351-1212. And I'm so grateful to everybody who sort of pitched in today in the absence of some of our folks today. Tina, thank you so much for being there at the phones. And also, Andrew, we do have another segment, but I didn't want the rest of the show to go by without thanking you for your hard work today. We'll be right back.
There's a new study out showing that for the first time since 1880, young adults are more likely to live at home with mom and dad than in their own households with a spouse or romantic partner. Pew Research Center analyzed the census data and found that in 2014, living with parents became the most common living arrangement for millennials. According to the report, among 18 to 34-year-olds, 32.1% were back home with parents, while 31.6% were married living with their spouse or unmarried and cohabiting with a boyfriend or girlfriend. The rest live with roommates, other family members, or alone. This brings to mind a couple of questions. First, is this a blip or a trend? It's a trend. The share of young adults living with their parents has been edging up since the 60s, dropping some in the 90s, but rising sharply after 2000. We could also ask, is this by choice or of necessity? Both. There's been a dramatic drop in the number of young people who settle down with a spouse or live-in romantic partner before age 35. Millennials are choosing to marry later or not at all. The report cites the postponement of, if not retreat from, marriage as an important factor in the uptick in young adults living with their folks. Studies show most still want to tie the knot someday, but there's a growing attitude among millennials that you've got to meet certain financial goals before marrying. That's in contrast to previous generations who may have struggled financially during early adulthood. We did without, but we did it married. So, yes, the trend toward young adults moving back home results from certain choices they're making, but it also rises from economic necessity. The worsening employment picture for young men in recent years is the subject of great concern, and this study showed more young men than young women living with their parents. Its authors point out that the share of young men with jobs peaked around 1980 at 84%. In 2014, only 71% of 18 to 34-year-old men were employed. More Black and Hispanic young people are unemployed and living with parents than whites, but the trend is up for all demographic groups. College graduates fare better in the labor market and establish their own households at higher rates, but student debt is also keeping more of them under their parents' roofs. These results, fueled by a sluggish jobs picture, dovetail with the popularity of out-of-the-box presidential candidates who promise to change it. Polls show the support for Donald Trump skews male, white, and poor. There is a bright side. Family togetherness can be a good thing. Maybe a time to work through some lingering immaturities. And better to be home with mom and dad than living in a non-marital sexual relationship. Kids, if you're in this spot, love on your folks and help out a lot. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Thank you for sticking with us here on Point of View on our Friday weekend edition. Let me point you to the Point of View website for a few things. I will try to get Amy Ridenour next week so that we can talk about this shareholder meeting. I think it's a very interesting subject. I want to hear the report. But you can find out more about it. It's written up at pointofview.net, and you can see the bio for Amy. So go there. And then I've also put an article up there from the Daily Signal, which is Heritage Foundation's daily publication, 6 men who disguise themselves as women to access bathrooms. It's really happening, ladies and gentlemen. That really happens. And it's why we're concerned about this transgender issue. So that's at pointofview.net. And then but there's just a lot there. Well, the donate button is there. I want to encourage you to use that because that's how Point of View continues to broadcast every day, is through the gifts of the listeners. So we've got a lot on the table, and we hope you'll take advantage of it. And one of the ways to do that is through our website. I think somebody's telling me that Amy is actually there, but I don't see her yet. If you can put her through and I can talk to her, that would be great. But I'm not sure that's ready to happen yet. So let me take a call from Dave in Texas. Hi, Dave. Thanks for calling in.
Yes, God bless you for what you
Bless you.
do. And we got Louis Gohmert down here in the 1st District.
Yeah, we know Louis well. He comes in and co-hosts on Fridays sometimes.
Uh-huh. Well, he's been around a long time, and he's one of the reasons why we need to vote. There's always one that we can find in there.
Mm-hmm.
Another issue is he's, Ted Cruz was not my first one, but like you said, God has probably chose him, and to get on our knees, we got to pray.
You mean Donald Trump?
Yes, Donald Trump, but I wanted to see Ted Cruz in there or Ben Carson.
Yeah.
It didn't happen. I voted for Ted Cruz here in Texas, and God is in charge, okay, of what's going on. He can move men and women's minds like rivers of water. And Donald Trump has said that he's got 11 judges. He gave us a list, and you know just as well as I do, Penna, that the judges that get in here are going to make a difference for our grandchildren, probably great-grandchildren.
Mm-hmm.
And what happened with this, all Christians can get behind two issues. One, you don't kill God's children, and Jesus tells you what's going to happen if you do mess with them, and marriage between a man and a woman. Janet Parshall told us what we was going to get. Way before this guy got into office, Obama, she told us, and it was worse than what she said.
It has been.
he left up the White House in rainbow colors celebrating this.
Yeah. I don't think we expected that, did we?
Well, it's going to get a lot worse if we get Hillary in there.
Okay, Dave, thanks for your call. I appreciate it. And we really appreciate your calling in. I'm going to have to move on because I think we've got our guest for the last few minutes of the program. And let me try. Amy, are you there?
I am here.
Hi, great.
Hey,
I'm glad.
right.
Thanks. Thanks for waiting on the line. We had a little technical difficulty, so I wasn't sure you were coming through. But your organization, the National Center for Public Policy Research, has taken an interest in this Target announcement that they're going to allow and really require all the stores to allow people in the restrooms according to their gender identity, and also the fitting rooms. This caused a boycott. It's been signed by over 1 million people, and the Target stock price has dropped, as we mentioned earlier in the program. You sent a representative to the shareholder meeting. What did he find out?
Well, basically what he found out is that the Target management does not wish to give an explanation for its actions. And worse than that, it has insinuated fairly strongly that to disagree with its bathroom policy is the equivalent to objecting to the hiring of black models when Target, back in the 1960s, decided to stop its racist policy of only hiring white models. Obviously, there are huge differences between race and transgender issues in restrooms. There is, in fact, no issue about race in restrooms, but that's what the Target management, indeed the CEO, said. They just won't explain why they got into this. And, here's another thing that's very odd about it with Target. Many Target stores have family restrooms. There's just one restroom. A man and a woman could go in with their child, whatever. It's not like 5 stalls. And they've already decided that in the stores that don't have family restrooms, they're going to convert to that. So Target could have simply skipped this whole debate and said, look, we have family restrooms. This doesn't apply to us.
Well, that's why we're wondering, why is Target weighing into this at all?
Well, that's what we asked them. Specifically, we said, you didn't have to be in this because you have family restrooms. Why did you? And he just said, well, we believe in inclusion. And, it's like they pat themselves on the head for being liberal activists, as if people aren't offended, as if people don't have serious concerns about their children being in restrooms with the opposite sex, as if there are no issues here. And there are issues here.
Well, and even in addition to the moral issues that you're discussing, Amy, I just got to think from a shareholder issue. They're like, why are you risking my money on this? This is not what Target is in business for. What other political stances are you going to take to, harm, my future investments that I've made? Was there any sort of shareholder backlash as a result of the meeting?
Yes. It's not necessarily completely obvious because when people sell their shares, you don't know exactly why they did it. But the share price has dropped 18% in just 7 weeks, the 7 weeks since their announcement. And 3 shareholders, not just us, questioned the CEO about this policy. Now, that may not seem like a lot, but typically in shareholder meetings, there will be 0 political questions.
Mm-hmm.
And this, of course, is a politically incorrect question, and it's a Minneapolis-based company, so they're not exactly in the what we would call the Bible Belt. So to get 3 questions is actually kind of extraordinary.
So
there's a backlash, all right.
Did I read somewhere there was protesting outside the shareholder meeting?
Yes, there was protesting. It didn't have to do with us, but yes, there were protests there. There have been protests in many of the stores as well. People feel strongly about this, and they don't believe this is them being bigots. They just believe this is normal modesty, normal privacy, and normal common sense.
And as I recall, the Attorney General of Texas sent them a letter and asked what they were going to do in light of this new policy, what they were going to do to provide for safety of people. Has that occurred anywhere else, or did they address that?
They did not talk about that in the shareholder meeting, but the CEO has addressed it outside the meeting and said they are committed to safety. Now, of course, those are pretty empty words. I don't believe they are putting armed guards in all the restrooms and fitting rooms, nor necessarily do people want that. So what does that mean? It really means nothing. And we have to keep in mind, the people say, oh, well, there was no problem before now, so there isn't going to be one now. Legally, if a man is in the woman's restroom now, he can simply say he was in there because he feels like he's a woman. In the old days, like 3 months ago, if a man was in the woman's restroom and he did something that's inappropriate, the prosecutor could go to the jury and say, why was he there at all? The very fact that he was there would be part of the legal case against him. So even though it may not have meant this or thought of it, Target has basically taken a tool from prosecutors away.
Wow.
Anytime there is an incident, and we know there's incidents. We're not blaming
we
the
know that. We've got some incidents on our website if you want to check them out, ladies and gentlemen. Amy, I wish we had more time with you, but thank you so much for joining us and really sending your representative there to the shareholders meeting. It was very telling. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us and have a great weekend.
I had what many would call the Cadillac of insurance plans with my company. It covered everything, and that's what got us started thinking, well, what is everything? Are we indirectly paying for people to use services that we don't believe in or want to be a part of? And MediShare was the perfect answer for that.
I felt such relief switching over to MediShare. I wasn't paying for anything that I didn't believe in. I was actually able to stand up for what I believe in, and I was able to put my money where my faith is.
We're part of this great program, and it really costs us less than insurance.
Learn how thousands of Christians can help you save on your health care. For your free information guide, call 855-BIBLE-11. Not available in Montana. MediShare, affordable biblical health care. Call 855-BIBLE-11. That's 855-BIBLE-11.
Point of View Radio needs you in 2016. Join today at pointofview.net. Become a monthly partner. Pointofview.net. Or call 1-800-347-5151. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank y'all for everything you do.